I stood in the middle of the ballroom, my cheeks stinging from the slap, the sharp crack still echoing in my ears. The chandeliers above cast a golden glow, but the light felt cold, like it was mocking me. My son's wedding was supposed to be a day of joy, a celebration of love. But instead, it had unraveled into a public spectacle. My daughter-in-law, Emily, stood before me, her emerald green dress shimmering as her chest heaved with rage. Her eyes, sharp as knives, bore into mine, daring me to react. The crowd around us, friends, family, strangers, stood frozen, their whispers a low hum that made my skin crawl. I could feel their judgment, their curiosity, their hunger for drama. But they didn't know the half of it. They didn't know what I'd done, or what I was about to do. It started months ago, when Emily first entered our lives. My son, Daniel, was smitten from the moment he met her. She was charming. I'll give her that, polished, articulate, with a smile that could disarm anyone. But there was something about her that set my nerves on edge. A flicker in her eyes that hinted at calculation, like she was always playing a game no one else could see. I tried to dismiss it as a mother's overprotectiveness. Daniel was my only child, my pride, my world after his father left us when he was just a boy. I'd raised him alone, pouring every ounce of myself into giving him a life of stability, love, and opportunity. So when he brought Emily home, I wanted to believe she was the one who'd make him happy. I wanted to trust her, but I couldn't. The first crack appeared at a family dinner 6 months before the wedding. Emily sat across from me, her laughter bright as she charmed Daniel's cousins and aunts. But when the conversation turned to family history, she grew quiet, her smile tightening. I mentioned my late mother's estate, the one I'd inherited and used to build our family's wealth, a wealth that now supported Daniel's dreams, his education, his future. Emily's eyes flicked to me, and for a moment, I saw something dark, something hungry. That must be quite a legacy, she said, her voice smooth but laced with an edge I couldn't ignore. I brushed it off, but the seed of doubt was planted. Over the months, that doubt grew into something monstrous. Emily was too perfect, too eager to please, yet too quick to steer conversations away from her past. She claimed to be an orphan, raised in foster care, with no family to speak of. It was a story that tugged at Daniel's heart. But to me, it felt like a carefully crafted shield. I started digging, quietly at first. Old records, social media traces, anything I could find. What I uncovered wasn't much, but it was enough to make my blood run cold. Emily wasn't who she said she was. Her real name was Amelia Carter, and she had a historious string of wealthy boyfriends, broken engagements, and whispers of fraud. She wasn't an orphan. She had a mother, alive and well, living in a small town 2 states away. Why the lies? What was she after? I confronted her privately, a month before the wedding. We sat in my study, the air thick with tension. I know who you are, Amelia, I said, watching her face pale. She denied it at first, her voice trembling. But when I showed her the evidence copies of old IDs, a photo of her with her mother, she crumbled. You don't understand, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. I had to start over. My past, it's complicated. I didn't buy it. I told her to come clean to Daniel, or I would. She begged me not to. Swore she loved him. Swore she'd changed. I gave her a deadline, 1 week. But she didn't tell him. Instead, she doubled down, weaving herself deeper into his life, convincing him I was the problem, that I was trying to tear them apart. By the time the wedding day arrived, I was a wreck. I hadn't told Daniel, yet he couldn't bring myself to shatter his happiness. But I'd made a decision. If Emily wouldn't come clean, I'd protect my son another way. I'd spent years building a fortune, not just for myself, but for him, for his future. The bulk of it was in a trust, one I controlled. I'd always planned to transfer it to Daniel after the wedding, a gift to start his new life. But that morning, as I watched Emily glide down the aisle, her smile radiant, but her eyes locked on mine with a glint of triumph, I knew I couldn't let her win. The reception was a blur of toasts and laughter, but the tension between us simmered. Then, during the mother-son dance, Emily cornered me near the dessert table. "You're not going to ruin this," she hissed, her voice low so no one else could hear. "Daniel deserves better than a mother who spies on his fiancée." Her words cut deep, but it was her next move that pushed me over the edge. She raised her hand and slapped me, hard, right in front of everyone. The room went silent, every eye on us. I could feel the heat rising in my face, not from pain, but from fury. She thought she'd humiliated me, that she'd won. She was wrong. I excused myself, slipping into the hallway, my heart pounding. I pulled out my phone and dialed my banker. "Freeze the trust," I said, my voice steady despite the chaos in my chest. "No transfers. No access. Until I say so." It was done in minutes. The fortune Emily thought she'd secured through Daniel was now untouchable. I returned to the ballroom, my head high, and caught her eye across the room. She was laughing with Daniel, oblivious to what I'd just done. But she'd find out soon enough. As the night wore on, I watched her. Every smile, every gesture, felt like a performance. I wondered if Daniel would ever see it, if he'd ever understand why I'd done what I did. I wasn't proud of it, not yet. But I wasn't sorry either. This was about protecting my son, about justice for the lies she'd spun. And deep down, I hoped, maybe naively, that this would force her to confront herself, to change. But that was a hope, not a certainty. For now, I'd wait. And I'd watch. The wedding reception dragged on, the clink of champagne glasses and forced laughter grating on my nerves. I stood near the edge of the dance floor, my cheeks still tingling from Emily's slap, though the sting had dulled to a faint pulse. The crowd had moved on, their whispers fading into the hum of celebration. But I could feel their glances curious, pitying, judgmental. I straightened my shoulders, refusing to let them see me crumble. Emily was across the room, her arm linked with Daniel's, her laughter bright and artificial. She thought she'd won, that her public display had put me in my place. She had no idea what I'd set in motion with that phone call. I sipped my wine, letting the bitter taste ground me. The trust was frozen, a fortress of wealth Emily couldn't touch, no matter how tightly she clung to my son. I'd spent years building that fortune, starting from the scraps of my mother's estate. Every investment, every late night poring over financial statements, had been for Daniel. To give him the life I never had. To shield him from the kind of betrayal his father inflicted on us. And now, here was Emily Amelia, as I knew her threatening to unravel it all. I couldn't let that happen. Daniel caught my eye from across the room, his smile faltering. He looked torn, caught between his new wife and his mother. The two women who'd shaped his world now at war. I wanted to go to him, to pull him aside and tell him everything about her lies, her past, the danger she posed. But I couldn't. Not yet. He was still under her spell. And I knew from experience that love could blind you to the truth. I'd been that way once. With his father. I'd believed in promises. In charm. Until the day he walked out, leaving me with a toddler and a mountain of debt. I wouldn't let Daniel learn that lesson the hard way. I moved to the bar, needing a moment to breathe. My sister, Clara, appeared at my side, her face etched with concern. What was that about? She asked, her voice low. Emily's slapping you. In front of everyone. I shook my head, not ready to explain. Clara had always been my confidant, the one who'd helped me pick up the pieces after Daniel's father left. But even she didn't know the full extent of what I'd uncovered about Emily. It's complicated, I said, my voice tight. She frowned, but didn't push. Just be careful, Ellen. She's got Daniel wrapped around her finger. Don't do anything you'll regret. Regret. The word hung in the air, heavy with irony. Did I regret freezing the trust? No. It was a calculated move, a shield to protect my son. But as I watched Daniel twirl Emily on the dance floor, her laughter ringing out, I felt a pang of something else, guilt. Maybe. Or fear. Fear that I'd pushed too far, that I'd lose him in this fight. I shoved the thought down. This wasn't about me. It was about him. About keeping him safe from a woman who'd built her life on deception. The night wore on, and I kept my distance, observing Emily like a hawk. She was good. I'll give her that. The way she leaned into Daniel, her hand resting lightly on his arm, her eyes sparkling with affection, was almost convincing. But I saw the cracks. The way her smile tightened when she thought no one was watching. The way her gaze darted to me every so often, as if checking to see if I'd strike back. She was waiting for my next move, and I was waiting for hers. It came sooner than I expected. As the guests began to thin out, Emily approached me again, this time alone. The ballroom was quieter now, the band playing a soft melody, the chandeliers casting long shadows across the floor. She stood close, her voice low and venomous. You think you can control him forever, don't you? She said, her eyes blazing. Daniel's not a child anymore. He's my husband now, and you need to back off. I met her gaze, unflinching. I know who you are. Amelia, I said, emphasizing her real name. And I know what you're after. You won't get it. Her face twisted, a flash of panic breaking through her composure. You don't know anything. She spat. You're just a bitter old woman who can't let go of her son. The word stung, but I didn't flinch. We'll see about that, I said, turning away before she could respond. I felt her eyes on my back as I walked away, the weight of her hatred pressing against me. But I wasn't afraid. Not yet. I found Daniel near the exit, adjusting his tie, his face weary. Mom, he said, his voice soft but strained. What's going on with you and Emily? That scene earlier. It wasn't right. My heart ached at the hurt in his eyes. But I couldn't tell him the truth, not here. Not now. I just want what's best for you, I said, reaching for his hand. He pulled away, just slightly, but enough to make my chest tighten. I know you do, he said. But Emily's my wife now. You need to trust me. Trust. The word felt like a knife. I nodded, forcing a smile. But inside, I was screaming. Trust was a luxury I couldn't afford not when it came to her. As Daniel walked away to rejoin Emily, I felt the weight of my decision settle over me. Freezing the trust was just the beginning. I needed to expose her, to make Daniel see the truth. But how? Confronting her again would only drive him further into her arms. I needed proof. Something undeniable. Something that would shatter her facade. And I needed it fast. Because Emily wasn't going to stop. She'd slapped me in front of everyone. A bold move to assert her power. But I was ready to fight back. This was war. And I wasn't going to lose. The morning after the wedding, I woke to the quiet of my house. The silence a stark contrast to the chaos of the night before. My cheek no longer stung, but the memory of Emily's slap burned bright in my mind. I sat at my kitchen table, coffee growing cold, replaying every moment the crowd's gasps. Daniel's conflicted expression, Emily's triumphant smirk. I'd frozen the trust. But it wasn't enough. She was still in his life, still whispering in his ear, still weaving her lies. I needed to act, to find a way to expose her before she sank her claws any deeper. I opened my laptop, the screen glowing with the files I'd collected on Emily or Amelia. As I now thought of her, there wasn't much, but it was damning. A grainy photo of her with her mother, taken years ago at a county fair. A court document from a dismissed fraud case. Her name listed as a co-defendant. A social media post from an old alias, hinting at a life of calculated charm. It was enough to raise questions, but not enough to convince Daniel. He'd need more, something concrete. Something that couldn't be explained away with tears or excuses. I called Clara, my sister, and asked her to come over. She arrived within the hour, her face a mix of worry and exasperation. Ellen, you look like you haven't slept, she said, setting her purse down. What's going on? And don't tell me it's nothing. I hesitated, then showed her the files. Her eyes widened as she scrolled through the evidence, her lips pressing into a thin line. This is serious, she said finally. But you can't just throw this at Daniel. He's in love with her. He won't believe it unless you have something undeniable. I nodded, frustration bubbling in my chest. I know. That's why I need your help. Clara had connections, friends in law enforcement, private investigators, people who could dig deeper than I could. She agreed to make some calls, but not without a warning. Be careful, Ellen. If you push too hard, you might lose him. He's not a boy anymore. Her words echoed Daniel's from the night before, and they stung just as much. But I couldn't stop. Not when I knew what Emily was capable of. While Clara worked her contacts, I decided to take a different approach. Emily had a mother, one she'd claimed was dead. If I could find her, talk to her, maybe I'd uncover the key to unraveling Emily's lies. The address I'd found was old, but it was a start. I drove 2 hours to a small town, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone else's business. The house was modest, a single story with peeling paint and a sagging porch. I knocked, my heart pounding, unsure what I'd find. A woman answered, her face lined with years of hard living. She looked at me with suspicion, her eyes narrowing. Can I help you? She asked, her voice rough. I took a breath. I'm looking for Amelia Carter's mother. Her expression shifted. A mix of surprise and wariness. That's me, she said. But I haven't gone by that name in years. Who are you? I explained, carefully, that I was Daniel's mother. That Amelia Millie was marrying my son. Her face darkened. She told you I was dead, didn't she? She said, her voice bitter. That's her way. Always running from her past. Over coffee in her cramped kitchen, she told me everything. Amelia had been a troubled kid, always chasing something bigger, better. She'd fallen in with the wrong crowd, gotten caught up in scams, left a trail of broken promises. She cut me off years ago, her mother said, her eyes glistening. Said I was holding her back. I haven't seen her since. I asked if she'd be willing to talk to Daniel, to tell him the truth. She hesitated, then shook her head. I don't want to drag her down. She's my daughter, even after everything. But I'll give you something. She handed me a letter, old and creased, written by Amelia to an ex-boyfriend. It was a confession of sorts, admitting to manipulating him for money. Maybe this'll help, she said. I drove home, the letter burning a hole in my purse. It was the proof I needed, but using it felt like crossing a line. Would Daniel believe it? Or would he see it as another attempt to sabotage his happiness? I didn't know, but I couldn't sit on it forever. Emily was moving fast. She and Daniel were already talking about buying a house, starting a family. Every day she spent with him was another day she could tighten her grip. That evening, I met Clara for dinner. She'd heard back from her investigator friend. He'd found Moria's bank account in Amelia's name, linked to suspicious transactions, deposits that didn't match her claimed income. It wasn't enough to prove fraud, but it was another piece of the puzzle. What are you going to do? Clara asked. I didn't have an answer. Not yet. But as I sat there, the letter in my purse and the frozen trust in my back pocket, I felt a flicker of resolve. Emily had started this war with that slap. I was going to finish it. I went home and drafted an email to Daniel, my fingers trembling as I typed. I didn't send it, not yet. But I laid out everything, the lies, the evidence, the letter. I begged him to listen, to see her for who she was. It was a risk, one that could push him away forever. But I had to try. Because if I didn't, I'd lose him to her lies. And that was a loss I couldn't bear. The next few days were a blur of sleepless nights and second-guessing. The letter from Emily's mother sat on my desk, its creased edges a constant reminder of the choice I faced. I hadn't sent the email to Daniel. Every time I opened it, my finger hovered over the send button. But something held me back. Fear. Maybe. Fear that he'd choose her over me. That he'd see my actions as betrayal rather than protection. I kept replaying his words from the wedding. You need to trust me. But how could I? When every instinct screamed that Emily was a threat. Clara called with an update. Her investigator had dug deeper and found a pattern. Amelia had a history of attaching herself to wealthy men. Each relationship ending with her walking away richer and them left in the dust. There were no convictions, no hard proof of crime, but the trail was clear. She's a grifter, Clara said, her voice hard. But she's smart. She covers her tracks. I felt a chill. Smart or not, Emily had underestimated me. Freezing the trust was just the beginning. I needed to outmaneuver her, to expose her without alienating Daniel. I decided to confront her again, this time on my terms. I called her and asked to meet at a quiet cafe downtown, away from prying eyes. She agreed, her voice cool but wary. When I arrived, she was already there, sitting in a corner booth, her posture rigid. She wore a simple black dress, her hair pulled back, but her eyes were as sharp as ever. "What do you want, Ellen?" she asked, skipping pleasantries. I slid the letter across the table. "I want you to tell Daniel the truth. All of it. Or I will." Her face paled as she read the letter, her fingers tightening around the paper. "Where did you get this?" she whispered. "Your mother," I said, watching her closely. Her eyes flicked up, shock and anger warring in them. "You went to her," she said, her voice rising. "You had no right." I leaned forward, my voice steady. "I have every right. You lied to my son. You lied to all of us. And I'm giving you one last chance to come clean before I do it for you." For a moment, she looked like she might break. Her lips trembled, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. But then her expression hardened, and she pushed the letter back toward me. "You think you've won," she said, her voice low and venomous. "But you don't know Daniel like I do. He loves me. He'll believe me over you, no matter what you show him." She stood, tossing her napkin on the table. "You're making a mistake, Ellen. A big one." I watched her walk away, my heart pounding. Her confidence rattled me, but it also steeled my resolve. She was betting on Daniel's love to shield her, but I was betting on the truth. I went home and revised the email to Daniel, attaching scans of the letter and the investigator's findings. I didn't send it yet, but I set a deadline for myself, 1 week. If Emily didn't come clean by then, I'd do it for her. That night, Daniel called. His voice was tense, like he was holding back a storm. "Mom, Emily told me you met with her today. She said you're trying to sabotage our marriage." My stomach dropped. She'd gotten to him first. "Daniel, it's not like that," I said, my voice shaking. "There are things you don't know about her. Things she's hiding." He cut me off. "Stop it, Mom. Just stop. I don't know what's going on with you, but you need to let this go. She's my wife." The line went dead, and I sat there, staring at the phone, my chest tight with grief. I didn't sleep that night. I kept thinking about Daniel's voice, the anger in it, the distance. I'd always been his rock, his safe place, but now I was the enemy. I wondered if I'd miscalculated, if I'd pushed too hard. But then I thought of Emily's smirk, her slap, her lies, and my resolve hardened. I wasn't fighting for myself. I was fighting for him. The next day, I got a call from Clara's investigator. He'd found something Nehwa bank transfer, dated just days before the wedding, from an account linked to Emily to an offshore account. It wasn't a huge amount, but it was suspicious, especially given her supposed lack of funds. "It's not enough to take to the police," he said, "but it's something." I thanked him and added it to my file. The pieces were coming together, but I needed more time. I spent the rest of the week watching, waiting, gathering every scrap of evidence I could. I tracked Emily's movements, noting her late-night phone calls, her secretive trips to the city. I didn't know what she was planning, but I knew it wasn't good. And as the deadline approached, I felt the weight of my decision pressing down on me. Sending that email would change everything. It could save Daniele or it could destroy us. But I was out of options. Emily had drawn the battle lines, and I wasn't going to back down. The deadline I'd set for myself loomed, a ticking clock in the back of my mind. 1 week to decide whether to send the email that could shatter Daniel's world or to give Emily one last chance to confess. I sat at my desk. The letter from her mother and the investigator's reports spread out before me like a map of her deception. Every piece of evidence pointed to the same truth. Emily was a liar, a manipulator, a woman who'd built her life on exploiting trust. But Daniel didn't see it. He was blinded by love, by her charm, by the future he thought they'd build together. And that blindness was breaking my heart. I tried to focus on the mundane work. Errands. Anything to keep my mind from spiraling. But every quiet moment brought me back to that night at the wedding. Her hand striking my face. The crowd's gasps. Daniel's conflicted eyes. I kept replaying our conversation at the cafe. Her defiance. Her certainty that Daniel would choose her. She was right about one thing. He loved her. But I was banking on something stronger, his trust in me, built over a lifetime of sacrifice and love. I just had to find a way to make him listen. Clara came over that evening, her face grim. My investigator found something else, she said, handing me a folder. Inside was a report on a real estate deal, a house Emily and Daniel had put an offer on, funded by a loan that listed Daniel as the sole guarantor. But there was a catch. The down payment had come from an account tied to Emily, one that matched the suspicious offshore transfer. She's using his credit, his name, to secure her future, Clara said. If this goes south, he's the one who'll pay. My stomach churned. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about control. I decided to try one last time to talk to Daniel, to reason with him before I sent the email. I called and asked him to come over. Alone. He hesitated but agreed. When he arrived, he looked exhausted. His shoulders slumped. His eyes shadowed. "Mom, I don't want to fight," he said, sitting across from me at the kitchen table. "I just want things to be normal." I took a deep breath, choosing my words carefully. "Daniel, I know you love her, but there are things about Emily you need to know. Things she's kept from you." He stiffened, his jaw tightening. "Not this again," he said. "Mom, I told you to let it go." I pushed forward, my voice trembling but firm. "She's not who she says she is. Her real name is Amelia Carter. She has a mother, alive, who she's cut out of her life. She's been linked to fraud, to scams. I have proof." I slid the letter across the table, watching his face. He didn't touch it, just stared at it like it was a bomb. "Why are you doing this?" he asked, his voice breaking. "Why can't you just be happy for me?" Tears stung my eyes, but I held his gaze. "Because I love you," I said. "Because I've spent my life protecting you. And I can't stop now. Not when I know she's lying to you." He stood, shoving the chair back. "You're wrong," he said, his voice raw. "You're wrong about her. And you're wrong about me. I'm not a kid anymore. I don't need you to protect me." He stormed out, leaving the letter untouched, the door slamming behind him. I sat there, numb, the silence deafening. I'd lost him. Not completely. Not yet. But the rift between us was growing, and I didn't know how to bridge it. I thought about sending the email right then, letting the truth do the work I couldn't. But something stopped me. Maybe it was hope. Maybe it was fear. But I needed one more piece, something so undeniable that even Daniel couldn't ignore it. The next day, I got a call from Emily's mother. She'd been thinking about our conversation, she said, and she'd found something else, a journal Amelia had kept as a teenager, filled with plans to make it big, to find a rich husband, to leave her past behind. It's not much, she said, her voice heavy, but it shows who she was. Maybe still is. She mailed it to me, and when it arrived, I read it cover to cover. The words were chilling. A blueprint for the woman Emily had become. I added it to my file. The final piece of my case. I was ready to send the email. But first, I needed to see Emily one more time. I needed to know if there was any chance she'd come clean. Any chance she'd spare Daniel the pain of learning the truth from me. I texted her, asking to meet at the same cafe. She didn't respond right away. But when she did, her message was curt, fine. Tomorrow. Noon. I spent the night preparing, steeling myself for what was to come. This was my last chance to avoid a war. But deep down, I knew it was already too late. The cafe was quieter this time. The lunchtime crowd thin. The air heavy with the scent of coffee and rain. I arrived early, choosing a table by the window, the journal and letter tucked in my bag. Emily walked in at exactly noon, her face a mask of calm, but her eyes betrayed her sharp, calculating, ready for a fight. She sat across from me, folding her hands neatly in her lap. Let's make this quick, she said. Her voice clipped. What do you want now, Ellen? I met her gaze, unflinching. The truth, I said. Tell Daniel everything, your real name, your past, the scams, or I will. She laughed. A cold, brittle sound. You're obsessed, she said. You think you've got me all figured out, don't you? But you're wrong. Daniel won't believe you. He'll see this for what it is, a desperate attempt to control him. I pulled the journal from my bag and slid it across the table. This is yours, I said. Written in your own words. Plans to manipulate, to deceive. And this, I placed the letter beside it, is from your mother. The one you said was dead. Her face froze, her eyes darting between the journal and the letter. For the first time, I saw fear in her expression. She reached for the journal, her hands trembling, but she didn't open it. You don't know what you're doing, she said, her voice low. You think you're protecting him, but you're tearing him apart. He loves me. He trusts me. If you show him this, you'll lose him forever. Her words hit hard, echoing my own fears. But I didn't waver. That's a risk I'm willing to take, I said, because I'd rather lose him than let you destroy him. She leaned forward, her voice a hiss. You're making a mistake. You have no idea what I'm capable of. I stood, gathering the journal and letter. You have until tomorrow, I said. Tell him, or I send everything to him. The choice is yours. I walked out, my heart pounding, her threat ringing in my ears. I didn't know what she meant, but I felt the weight of it, like a storm gathering on the horizon. When I got home, I finalized the email to Daniel, attaching every piece of evidence, the letter, The journal. The bank records. The investigator's reports. I set it to send automatically at midnight the next day unless I stopped it. It was my insurance policy. My last line of defense. That evening, Clara came over, her face pale. I got a call from my investigator. She said, Emily's been making moves. She's been in touch with a lawyer, someone known for handling high-stakes divorces. It's like she's preparing for a fight. My blood ran cold. Divorce. They'd been married less than a week. Was she already planning her exit, with Daniel's money in her pocket? I told Clara about the cafe, about Emily's threat. She's cornered, Clara said. And cornered animals are dangerous. Be careful, Ellen. I barely slept that night, my mind racing. I kept checking my phone, half expecting a call from Daniel, a text from Emily, anything to break the tension. But there was nothing. Just silence, heavy and oppressive. The next morning, I woke to a voicemail from Daniel. His voice was strained, almost broken. Mom, we need to talk. Can you come to the house? Please. My heart leapt into my throat. Had Emily told him? Was this the moment I'd been waiting for or dreading? I drove to their apartment, my hands gripping the wheel. When I arrived, Daniel opened the door, his face pale, his eyes red-rimmed. Emily was nowhere in sight. She's gone, he said, his voice hollow. She left this morning. Said she needed space. He handed me a note, written in Emily's precise handwriting. It was short, cryptic. I'm sorry, Daniel. I love you, but I can't do this anymore. My stomach twisted. Was this her escape? Or another manipulation? I sat with Daniel, listening as he poured out his confusion, his pain. She said you were trying to tear us apart. He said that you wouldn't stop until you'd ruined her. Is that true, Mom? I took a deep breath, my heart aching. I was trying to protect you, I said. There are things about her you don't know. I told him everything: her real name, her past, the evidence I'd gathered. I showed him the letter, the journal, the bank records. He listened, his face a mask of shock and disbelief. But he didn't interrupt. When I finished, he was silent for a long time, staring at the papers in his hands. I need to think, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. I need time. I nodded, my throat tight. I'm here, Daniel. Whenever you're ready. I left him there, alone with the truth, praying I hadn't broken him. As I drove home, I canceled the email. He'd heard it from me. Now it was up to him to decide what to do with it. The days that followed were agony. Daniel didn't call, didn't text. The silence was worse than any argument, a void that swallowed my thoughts. I kept picturing his face as I'd left him, pale, broken, the weight of Emily's betrayal sinking in. Had I done the right thing? Had I saved him? Or had I pushed him away for good? The evidence was undeniable. But love wasn't rational. I knew that better than anyone. I'd loved his father once, despite the red flags, and it had nearly destroyed me. I couldn't let Daniel make the same mistake. Clara tried to keep me grounded, inviting me over for coffee, forcing me to eat. Give him time, she said, her voice gentle but firm. He's processing. He'll come around. But I wasn't so sure. I'd seen the way he looked at Emily. The way his whole world seemed to light up in her presence. Could the truth compete with that? I spent hours staring at the frozen trust documents, wondering if I'd been too quick to pull the trigger. Maybe I should have waited, given her a chance to prove me wrong. But then I'd remember her slap, her lies, her threat in the cafe, and my resolve would harden. A week after our talk, Daniel finally called. His voice was quiet, subdued. "Can we meet?" he asked. "There's something I need to show you." My heart raced as I drove to his apartment, unsure what to expect. When I arrived, he was sitting on the couch, a laptop open in front of him. Emily still hadn't returned, he said, but she'd been in touch texting, calling, promising to explain everything. I didn't know what to believe, he said, his eyes fixed on the screen. So I did some digging of my own. He turned the laptop toward me. On the screen was a bank statement, one I hadn't seen before. It showed a series of transfers from the account linked to Emily, the same one the investigator had flagged, to another account in Daniel's name, one he hadn't known about. "She opened it last month," he said, his voice tight. "She said it was for our future, for the house. But look at the dates." The transfers coincided with her secretive trips to the city, the ones I'd noticed but couldn't pin down. She was moving money, he said. "My money?" Without telling me. I felt a surge of vindication, but it was tempered by the pain in his eyes. "I'm so sorry, Daniel," I said, reaching for his hand. This time, he didn't pull away. "I wanted to believe her," he said, his voice breaking. "I wanted to believe she loved me." I squeezed his hand, my heart aching. "She might have," I said, though the words felt hollow. "But love doesn't justify lies." He nodded, tears welling in his eyes. And for the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of hope. He was seeing her, really seeing her, for the first time. We spent the next hour going through the evidence together, piecing together her actions. The journal, the letter, the bank records, it all painted a clear picture. Emily had been planning this for months, maybe longer. The house, the marriage, the charm, it was all part of her game. But she'd miscalculated. She hadn't counted on me, on my refusal to let her win. And now, Daniel was starting to see the truth. He decided to confront her, to demand answers. I offered to go with him, but he shook his head. "I need to do this alone," he said. "But I want you to know, I'm sorry for not listening sooner." His words were a balm, soothing the raw edges of my fear. I hugged him, holding him tight. And for a moment, it was just us again, mother and son. Unbreakable. Emily agreed to meet him that evening at a park near their apartment. I waited at home, my stomach in knots, checking my phone every few minutes. When Daniel finally called, his voice was steady but heavy. "She admitted some of it," he said. "Not everything, but enough. She said she was desperate, that she'd made mistakes but wanted to start over with me. She begged me to give her another chance." My heart sank. "What did you say?" I asked, bracing myself. "I told her it was over," he said. "I can't trust her. Not after this." Relief flooded me, but it was bittersweet. Daniel was safe, but he was hurting. I drove to his apartment, and we sat together, talking late into the night. He told me about the good times with Emily, the moments that had made him fall in love. I listened, letting him grieve, knowing that healing would take time. But for the first time in months, I felt like we were on the same side again. The war wasn't over. Emily was still out there. And I didn't trust her to go quietly, but we'd won a battle. And that was enough for now. The weeks that followed were a delicate dance of healing and vigilance. Daniel moved back into his old room at my house, needing space from the apartment he'd shared with Emily. The place was filled with her presence, her clothes still in the closet, her perfume lingering in the air. He said it was too much, too soon. I welcomed him home, grateful to have him close. But I could see the toll this had taken. His laughter was gone, replaced by a quiet intensity, a man grappling with betrayal. I wanted to fix it, to take away his pain. But all I could do was be there, steady and unwavering. Emily hadn't disappeared completely. She texted him, long messages filled with apologies, promises to change, pleas for forgiveness. Daniel showed me a few, his face unreadable. She says she loves me, he said, his voice flat. She says she made mistakes, but wants to make it right. I didn't trust it. I'd seen her kind before, charming, manipulative, always one step ahead. But I didn't push. Daniel needed to come to his own conclusions, and I had to trust he would. Clara's investigator kept tabs on Emily, reporting her movements. She'd moved into a small apartment in the city, paid for with funds from an unknown source. She's not done, Clara warned me. She's licking her wounds, but she'll come back. People like her always do. I nodded, my mind racing. Freezing the trust had protected Daniel's future. But Emily was resourceful. If she couldn't get to his money, she'd find another way to hurt him or me. I decided to take a proactive step. I met with my lawyer, a sharp woman named Margaret who'd helped me set up the trust years ago. I explained everything: Emily's lies, the evidence, the slap at the wedding. Margaret listened, her face impassive, then leaned forward. You've got a strong case if you want to pursue legal action, she said. Fraud, misrepresentation, maybe even extortion, depending on what else we find. But it'll be messy, and it could drag Daniel into it. I hesitated. I didn't want to hurt him more than he already was. What about a restraining order? I asked. She nodded. That's an option. It'd keep her away from you and Daniel, at least for now. I filed for the restraining order the next day, citing Emily's threat in the cafe and her history of deception. It was a small step, but it felt like reclaiming power. When Daniel found out, he didn't object, but he didn't celebrate either. I just want this to be over, he said, his voice weary. I hugged him, promising it would be, even though I wasn't sure I believed it. A month after the confrontation, Emily made her move. Daniel got a call from a lawyer, not Margaret, but someone representing Emily. They were demanding access to the trust, claiming Daniel had promised her a share as part of their marriage. My blood boiled. She was trying to rewrite the narrative, to paint herself as the victim. I called Margaret, who laughed when she heard the claim. It's a bluff, she said. The trust is ironclad, and she has no legal standing. But she's trying to scare you, to see if you'll cave. I wouldn't. And neither would Daniel. We met with Margaret together, going over the trust documents. She explained that even if Daniel had promised Emily anything, it didn't matter. A trust was in my control, and I hadn't authorized any transfers. Daniel listened, his face grim but resolute. I don't want her to have a cent, he said. Not after what she did. I felt a surge of pride. He was stronger than I'd given him credit for. Stronger than I'd been at his age. That night, Daniel and I talked for hours. Not about Emily, but about us. He told me about his dreams, his fears, the weight of starting over. I told him about my own mistakes, the years I'd spent rebuilding after his father left. I didn't want you to go through that, I said, my voice thick with emotion. That's why I fought so hard. He nodded, his eyes soft. I know, Mom. And I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. For the first time in months, I felt like we were truly connected again, like the rift between us was healing. But Emily wasn't done. A week later, Clara's investigator called with news. Emily had been spotted meeting with a man known for shady financial dealings. She's planning something, he said. I don't know what, but it's big. I felt a chill. I'd thought the restraining order would keep her at bay, but she was like a shadow, always lurking, always waiting. I didn't know what her next move would be, but I knew one thing for certain: I'd be ready. The air felt heavier as the weeks passed, like the calm before a storm. Daniel was slowly rebuilding, throwing himself into work, spending evenings with old friends, trying to reclaim the pieces of himself Emily had shattered. I watched him closely, proud of his resilience, but haunted by the fear that she wasn't done with us. The restraining order was in place. The trust was secure. But Clara's investigator kept sending updates that made my skin crawl. Emily was circling, meeting with questionable contacts, moving money in ways that didn't add up. She was planning something, and I needed to know what. I decided to take matters into my own hands. I hired a private investigator of my own, a man named Tom who came highly recommended by Margaret. He was discreet, thorough, and didn't ask too many questions. I gave him everything I had on Emily, her real name, her aliases, the bank records, the journal. Find out what she's up to, I told him. And do it fast. He nodded, his face unreadable, and promised to report back within the week. While Tom worked, I focused on Daniel. He was opening up more, talking about his plans to sell the apartment, to start fresh somewhere new. I don't want any reminders of her, he said one night over dinner. It's like she's still here, in every corner of that place. I understood. I'd felt the same after his father left, purging every trace of him from our home. You'll get through this, I said, squeezing his hand. You're stronger than you know. He smiled. A small, fragile thing, but it gave me hope. Tom called 3 days later with a breakthrough. Emily had been meeting with a man named Victor Klein, a low-level financier with a reputation for laundering money. They'd been seen together at a downtown hotel, exchanging documents. I got a look at one of them, Tom said. It's a contract. Looks like a loan agreement, with Daniel's name forged on it. My heart stopped. Forgery. She was trying to tie Daniel to her schemes, to drag him down with her. Can you get proof? I asked. Already working on it, Tom said. But you need to warn him. She's moving fast. I told Daniel that night, showing him Tom's preliminary report. His face went pale, his hands clenching into fists. She's still trying to use me, he said, his voice shaking with anger. After everything, she's still trying to win. I nodded, my own anger simmering. We'll stop her, I said. We have the truth on our side. He looked at me, his eyes searching mine. I should have listened to you from the start, he said. I'm sorry, Mom. I pulled him into a hug, my throat tight. You're here now? I said. That's what matters. Tom's next report came 2 days later, and it was explosive. He'd gotten a copy of the forged contract, along with emails between Emily and Victor Klein discussing how to leverage Daniel's credit for a massive loan. The plan was simple but ruthless. Use Daniel's name to secure the money, then disappear, leaving him to deal with the fallout. She's counting on him not fighting back, Tom said. She thinks he's too broken to stand up to her. I felt a surge of fury. She'd underestimated Daniel, and she'd underestimated me. We took the evidence to Margaret, who laid out our options. We can go to the police, she said. This is fraud. Plain and simple. With the restraining order already in place, it strengthens our case. Daniel hesitated, his face torn. I don't want to drag this out, he said. I just want her gone. I understood, but I also knew Emily wouldn't stop unless we forced her to. If we don't act, she'll keep coming back, I said. We need to end this. For good. He nodded, his jaw tight. Do it, he said. Margaret filed a police report, attaching Tom's evidence. The next day, Emily was brought in for questioning. I didn't trust myself to stay calm, but Daniel did, wanting to see it through. When he came home, he looked lighter, like a weight had been lifted. She didn't deny it, he said. She tried to spin it, said it was a misunderstanding, but the evidence was too strong. They're charging her with fraud and identity theft. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. It wasn't over not yet, but it was close. That night, Daniel and I sat on the porch, watching the stars. I don't know how to thank you, he said, his voice soft. You fought for me, even when I didn't want you to. I smiled, tears stinging my eyes. That's what mothers do, I said. We fight for our kids, no matter what. He reached for my hand, and for the first time in months, I felt peace. Emily was losing her grip, and we were finding our way back to each other. But I knew the fight wasn't over. Not until she was truly gone. The legal process moved slowly, but it was relentless. Emily's arrest was just the beginning. The police built a case, bolstered by Tom's evidence and the paper trail she'd left behind. Daniel and I met with the prosecutor, a no-nonsense woman named Linda who laid out the charges: fraud, identity theft, and violation of the restraining order. She's looking at serious time, Linda said, her voice matter of fact. But she's fighting it. Claims she's the victim, that you framed her. I wasn't surprised. Emily was a master at twisting the truth. But this time, she was out of moves. Daniel struggled with the weight of it all. He'd loved her, believed in her, and now he had to face the reality of her betrayal in a courtroom. I tried to shield him, to keep him focused on the future, but I could see the toll it took. I keep thinking about what I missed, he said one night, staring at the floor. All the signs were there, and I ignored them. I shook my head, resting a hand on his shoulder. You loved her, I said. That's not a weakness. It's what makes you human. He nodded, but the pain in his eyes lingered. As the trial date approached, Emily's lawyer tried to negotiate a plea deal. But the prosecutor held firm. She's got no leverage. Linda told us. The evidence is overwhelming. Still, I braced myself for surprises. Emily was cunning, and I didn't trust her to go down without a fight. The night before the trial, I got a call from an unknown number. I answered, my heart pounding, and heard her voice calm, cold, like a blade in the dark. You think you've won, she said. But this isn't over. You'll regret this. Ellen. I hung up, my hands shaking, and called Margaret immediately. She assured me it was a desperate move, a violation of the restraining order that would only strengthen our case. But the call left me rattled, a reminder of her reach. The trial was short but brutal. Emily took the stand, her eyes wide with crocodile tears, spinning a story of a controlling mother-in-law and a misunderstanding gone wrong. But the evidence was airtight: the forged contract, the bank records, the journal, the letter from her mother. Daniel testified, his voice steady but raw, recounting how he'd discovered the account in his name, the betrayal he'd felt. I watched him, my heart swelling with pride and pain. He was stronger than I'd ever imagined, standing up to the woman who'd tried to destroy him. The jury deliberated for less than a day. Guilty on all counts. Emily was sentenced to 3 years in prison, with restitution to Daniel for the financial damage she'd caused. As they led her away, she looked at me, her eyes burning with hatred. I held her gaze, unflinching. She tried to break us, but she'd failed. Daniel and I left the courtroom together, the weight of the past months lifting with every step. In the weeks that followed, Daniel started to heal. He sold the apartment, moved into a new place, and threw himself into his work. He even started dating again, cautiously, his heart still tender but open to possibility. I unfroze the trust, transferring it to him as I'd always planned, but with safeguards to protect him from future threats. He thanked me, his eyes shining with gratitude, and I knew we'd come through the fire together. I thought a lot about redemption in those days. Emily had chosen her path, one of lies and manipulation, but I wondered if she'd ever change. Her mother's words echoed in my mind. She's my daughter, even after everything. I hoped, for her sake, that she'd find a way to make amends, to rebuild. But that wasn't my fight anymore. My fight was for Daniel, for our family, for the bond we'd nearly lost. One evening, as we sat on my porch, Daniel turned to me. You never gave up on me, he said, his voice soft. Even when I pushed you away. I smiled, tears welling in my eyes. Never, I said. And I never will. We sat in silence, the stars above us bright and steady, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, there was light to be found. Emily's slap had started this war, but it was my love for my son that had won it. And that was a victory worth everything.